What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Happy Monday. If you're tuned in live on YouTube and wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, I certainly would appreciate it. Say what's up in the Toyota chat. You know the drill by now. We've got a lot to get into. Busy basketball weekend, busy couple of weeks of hoops coverage coming up. Really looking forward to getting out to the Mountain West tournament. Feels like the possibility of chaos is fully on the table for the league, which is always great. It's the beauty of the sport. It's what makes these couple of weeks so chaotic, but also just fun, is the idea that technically anybody still has a chance to make a little bit of noise to keep their NCAA tournament hopes alive. The Rams, now winners of 7 straight. They completed the perfect month on Saturday evening. 85-73 win over San Jose State. Probably the last matchup against San Jose State for the foreseeable future, depending on what happens with the matchups in Vegas. But we will get into that. I'll dive into the takeaways, key stats, all of that. We'll set the scene for New Mexico. Big test coming up at the Pit Wednesday night. It's definitely going to be the hardest game the Rams have had to play in this stretch. But I think there's reason to believe that it might be a more competitive game than when the first two played early in league play. You dive through some of those stats, and I mean, Joppa played like almost 15 minutes in that game. McConan played 11 minutes. And while I'm not trying to take shots at either of those dudes, those are guys that aren't even in your rotation anymore. So it's just a completely different looking CSU team. Jorgensen was hurt at that point. So was Bemba. So really a really different looking Rams team that you'll see going up against New Mexico this time around. The Lobos trying to play for their at-large hopes, but also trying to keep slim hopes of a conference championship alive. They've got a tough week with CSU coming to the Pit, and then they play at Utah State. Utah State thumped them earlier in the year down in Albuquerque, so that'll be a fun matchup to close the season. Before I get too far into the show here, I do want to start just by offering my condolences to the CU football community. If you missed the news, quarterback Dominique Ponder tragically passed away in a car accident over this weekend, which is just horrific. So my heart goes out to anybody impacted by that. Certainly we love to go back and forth. Rivalries are great for college sports. But when something like that happens, certainly it's an instance where you love to see people, you know, using a little bit of class and sportsmanship. I thought it was great that CSU football made a post about it and offered their condolences as well. Some things are bigger than sports, and I mean, I think we can keep it at that. But my heart certainly goes out to the Ponder family, and again, everybody impacted. Just a really, really unfortunate situation. Starting with the best and worst of the weekend, my little homage to Dan Patrick. Best of the weekend, CSU basketball programs completing a pretty awesome February. The men's and women's team are in a combined 12-game winning streak. The women have won 5 in a row. The men have won 7. Collectively went 13-1 over the month of February. So things are really trending the right direction for both hoops programs going into the Mountain West tournament. Would be really cool to see the women find a way to make a run in Vegas, should get a first-round bye, and potentially, you know, play their way into the NCAA tournament. It's been a decade now, long overdue. So it would be awesome to see them keep this rolling. Worst of the weekend, in addition to the Nuggets losing to both the Timberwolves and the Thunder, two teams I just genuinely cannot stand, division rivals. I really feel like, for whatever reason, those teams just kind of have Denver's number. But I will say, stylistically, I love watching Anthony Edwards so much more than SGA. He's brutal. He's in the same vein of Houston Rockets era James Harden, where I recognize how gifted of a basketball player he is, how skilled he is, and it is a skill to foul bait the way that he does, although I feel like it goes against the spirit of competition. I mean, it puts you in a position to win, and he's obviously very talented. It's just tough. Also, my dirtbag neighbor, I'm in like a 90s sitcom scenario. He did a bunch of work, cutting up some stone and some wood in his lawn yesterday. Got all kinds of crap all over my driveway. Just left. He doesn't live there full time. It's a rental property. So we're beefing now. I don't know if he knows it, but we're at war. And suddenly I'm going to, I don't know, maybe if there's a blizzard or something, I'm going to have to blow all my snow onto his driveway or something to get back at him. Not really. I probably will do nothing because my fiance has encouraged me to be the mature man in the situation. I don't really want to be, though. I kind of want to lean into pettiness. So again, whether he knows it or not, we're at war. We are beefing. We're going to have a ton of spring football content coming up. So I encourage you to become a DNVR diehard. It seems we have extended the intro promotion for another 24 hours. So you can become a DNVR diehard, get access to everything that I write, as well as everything else we've got going on at thednvr.com. For just $36, you get a free premium shirt with your subscription. So you're basically getting a year's worth of coverage for the price of a t-shirt, on top of discounts at the bar, everything else. It's a great opportunity to support what we do, to support local journalism. And if you appreciate what I do here on the DNVR Rams side of things, I understand money can be tight. Not everyone can afford it, but if you would consider subscribing, it's one of those things that it allows me to show, the higher ups in the company that it is in fact worth it to invest in CSU coverage. There are a ton of Ram fans out there. I know so many of you already do subscribe and support my work, and I certainly am appreciative for all of you guys. Lastly, shout out John Tanjay, just kind of going through the list of things I had to ramble about before we got into the main portion of the show. I signed a 2-way contract with the Boston Celtics, former CSU, I guess you could call him a star based on his last season, certainly a key contributor on multiple NCAA tournament teams. He originally signed a 10-day deal with the Celtics, has been able to play his way into a 2-way contract, which you love to see. Pretty crazy when you look back on that signing class. I know Kevin Lytle did a great feature on that, I feel like a year or two ago, where he kind of went through that 2021, I believe, class it would be, with Roddy and all those guys, and how they've been on to go be pros. I mean, you've got 3 NBA guys, a couple of others playing in Europe. It's been pretty impressive to see, and it's certainly been fun to see the profile of the program elevated on a national level, kind of in that line of thinking in ways that the Pac-12 could maybe elevate their brand on a national level. Watching Gonzaga and St. Mary's over the weekend has me once again pondering conference realignment possibilities, all the hypotheticals we've been talking about now for well over a year. But just kind of watching that game, and it's been such a classic in the WCC. If you are a college basketball sicko, if you're somebody who follows this process more in depth than just the NCAA tournament, you're well aware of these two WCC powerhouses and all the great battles that they've had over the years. St. Mary's in particular, it feels like over the last 4 or 5 years has maybe closed the gap, is a bit dramatic to phrase it, but they've certainly been able to go punch for punch with Gonzaga in a lot of these head-to-head matchups. They won on Saturday night. Really impressive shooting performance down the stretch. Mikey Lewis was a stud, able to outshine, Graham Ike and some of those star players on the Gonzaga side of things. And I just started thinking to myself that it is a shame that, at least as of now, and we'll see what happens down the line here, but as of now, this is the last game on the books between these two great teams and this great rivalry. You could have a very similar conversation about San Diego State and New Mexico. How many epic battles have we seen between those two teams over the years? Now, obviously, with San Diego State going to the Pac-12, New Mexico staying back in the Mountain West, we're not going to get games between those two teams at the pit. Brian Dutcher has already gone on record and basically said he's not going to play at altitude against anyone he doesn't have to. So, they'll come to Moby because they're Pac-12 opponents, but wouldn't expect to see San Diego State on the road against teams like New Mexico, Wyoming, Air Force. Not shocking that they wouldn't want to go to Laramie or the Springs, but it is a bummer that they're going to use altitude as an excuse to not play the Lobos on their home floor. And then if you're New Mexico, if they're not willing to come to the pit, you're unlikely to go to Viejas. So now it just becomes a battle of egos and who's willing to blink. I will say maybe we're able to get them in neutral site games, but it's just not the same. Neutral site games going from all those epic battles at the pit and Viejas to potential neutral site games. It's just a shame that that is a pitfall, excuse me, in this whole realignment process. I've gone on the record multiple times. I'm really excited about the future of the Pac-12, particularly on the basketball side. I think it's going to be close to, the Big East. I think it'll be a top 5 basketball conference year in and year out. I think it'll be a multi-bid league. And I think the fact that the Pac-12 was willing to give Gonzaga a full share despite not having football shows a real commitment to hoops and an understanding that while football is always what's going to drive the wagon with realignment, it's going to dictate the majority of these moves. For a league like the Pac-12, there's real value into leaning into that late night hoops package that you can offer, especially if you end up in a scenario where it's like back to back with Big East games. I mean, I think there's a lot of desire and interest to kind of lean into that if you're the Pac-12. I'm really excited to see Gonzaga, come into Moby on a yearly basis. Probably going to be some tough games for the Rams. I don't know how many of those you're exactly going to win. Does feel like the gap between Gonzaga and everybody else, just given the fact that they're going to get a full media share that they don't then have to split with football. They're just going to have more money than everybody else in the future Pac-12 for recruiting and everything else. But I would love to see this rivalry with St. Mary's kept alive. And I know that they don't have football, which potentially is just a deal breaker altogether, especially if you can't add a football member to bring them over with. For instance, UConn. I know our guy Tyler Shannon has thrown that hypothetical out quite a few times on Twitter, the possibility of, do you add UConn as a football only member despite the geography of it all? If you can then get some type of out of conference scheduling agreement with UConn in the Big East out of it, there's potentially a lot of value there. UConn certainly would be interested in it just for the opportunity to get their football team in a conference. It makes sense, especially given how things have seemed to play out with schools like Memphis, who didn't really seem all that eager to spend a bunch of money to move all of their sports to the Pac-12. I still feel like it's the wrong decision in the big picture. Their fans are really disinterested in the moment. Part of that, too, is they're struggling this season under Penny Hardaway. But when you listen to any of the Memphis podcasts or their content creators, when you write or when you read the writing of Gary Parrish and some of these people who are big voices in that community, there's a desire for more. All of their peers are elsewhere now. They jumped ship when the Big 12 rated the American. Some of them ended up in the Big East. Like they're in a position where they're should be dominant, but you're with a bunch of schools nobody cares about. And long term, even if it's a bit of a gamble and you might have to spend some money up front, I think that makes more sense to try and create something interesting and unique for your program than, leaning into right now and playing it safe. I just don't see that working out all that well for Memphis in the long run. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. But because they haven't been seemingly willing to play ball with you, I do think that's when you then open up the conversation for teams like UConn, especially with a basketball scheduling agreement. That's more intriguing to me, despite, again, the crazy perception or just on the surface of it being UConn in the Pac-12. Like, I get it on the surface. That seems really silly. It's kind of where we're at with college sports today. But, if you did that and then you added St. Mary's, who you probably wouldn't give a full share like you gave Gonzaga, I'm not sure if you'd even give them a half share. That becomes a negotiation battle, right? Of what are you willing to take? I would imagine that even like a third of this Pac-12 share would be superior to what they would be projected to make in a WCC, especially without Gonzaga moving forward. but it gives you more Olympic sports. It helps you with soccer and baseball and some of those types of things. And then just from the standpoint of making what should be a fun and competitive basketball conference even more fun and competitive by adding a brand like St. Mary's, who gives you 2 more quality games. I mentioned this a couple of times, but it's going to be a real burden on programs like CSU to try and fill this non-conference schedule with the current plan. I mean, 20 non-conference games is a ton to have to fill. I don't think that people realize how challenging it is for schools like CSU to get those types of games on the books, especially against high majors, because they don't want to risk losing to teams like CSU. They're not going to come to Moby. They generally will only play you in like neutral settings. I think there's a lot of logic in leaning into that strong basketball identity. You also prevent the Mountain West from potentially adding St. Mary's in that scenario and strengthening what should still be a competitive basketball league. The football outlook for the conference feels bleak, but Nevada, New Mexico, UNLV at the moment, although my gut is they still potentially end up in the Pac-12 down the line. With St. Mary's, I mean, that's another competitive hoops league, and you just want to do everything you can to separate yourself from those other leagues, the American and the Mountain West. The debate is, does St. Mary's move the needle enough to justify splitting the pie more ways? And again, I don't think you would give them a full share like you would with Gonzaga. But if you add a football member and you're able to increase the media revenue, and that would be I would assume, selling point for adding a team in the Eastern time zone, is that potentially puts more TV money on the table for the Pac-12, then maybe you could justify really leaning into that basketball identity even more. But I think when you look at the competitive profile of St. Mary's, and I'll dive into the numbers here in just a second, we need to take a quick break and shout out our partners. I think there's an opportunity for them to be a really fun move for what should be a pretty awesome basketball conference. I'm not a businessman, though, so we'll dive into that. Let's take a quick breather real quick. Let's shout out our partners, and we'll keep it rolling. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you're looking for gear to make your brand stand apart, look no further than the homies at Branded Bills. They've got you covered with the best custom headwear around. Start your order. Their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel that you need. I've got a couple on set there. We at DNVR and throughout the ALLCITY network have used Branded Bills for some of our own custom gear. I love their hats because they're versatile. They look sharp. You could wear it out to eat on a date or something like that. But athletic material, moisture wicking, they're versatile. You could wear them golfing if you're out walking the dog, stuff like that as well. Sometimes if you go with like a classic fitted like I have on now, that can be a bit much. It can be not very breathable. I love how breathable the Branded Bills hats are. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. I also want to talk to you about Shady Rays. You know that moment, the one you realize you left your favorite sunglasses at the beach or on the roof of your car or at a gas station 3 states away, the airport, wherever it may be. I've been there. It sucks. You don't have to worry about that anymore. I've lost more pairs of sunglasses than I can even count between umpiring baseball back in the day and sight directing tournaments. I bet you I've left a pair of shades at just about every sporting complex in the state. Then I found Shady Rays. It changed the game for me. These sunglasses are made for real life. They're seriously good looking, polarized, durable, and not stupidly expensive, which I love. On top of that, you can rest easy knowing that every single pair is backed by lost and broken replacements. If you lose it, if you break it, they'll replace your shades, no questions asked. We've teamed up with Shady Rays to bring you an exclusive offer. Head to shadyrays.com. Use the code DNVR for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. I got a question here from Mark in the Toyota chat, which I think is fair. What would Gonzaga look like without Mark Few? Probably not this, but I think you could say the same thing about Coach K at Duke. Look at Duke pre-Coach K. Sometimes it takes one phenomenal individual to really build something incredible. And frankly, that's what it should have been with CSU football and Sonny Lubick. He should have been able to build off of the momentum instead of wasting, everything that he did. That's a rant for another day. But I I do think it's fair. CD Sticks also brings up, what does St. Mary's look like past Randy Bennett, what Randy Bennett has done to elevate that program, and especially what they've been able to sustain here over the last decade or so. It's pretty incredible. You know, they do have 11 NCAA tournament appearances in the 21st century, most of those coming under Randy Bennett. So it's not as if he is the only coach that's ever experienced success there. He has elevated them to another level, but I think you could also make an argument that by being in the Pac-12, all of a sudden, it elevates what's possible for a program like St. Mary's. I mean, that's the thing about success. If you invest right in what needs to be the case for a program like CSU, I always go back to that San Diego State blueprint, right? First, you start competing, then you start getting to tournaments here or there. Now, all of a sudden, the tournament becomes a yearly expectation, and it's about how far can we go in the tournament. You're constantly elevating what you feel like is possible for your program. And if you're St. Mary's, you look at a program like Gonzaga and maybe you say, realistically, we're probably not going to be that. I mean, Gonzaga's a top 5 program in college basketball today in terms of year in, year out, what they're able to do. But could they not consistently be a top 25 program with more resources? I don't think that's impossible, especially if the Pac-12 really does lean into this basketball identity. I mean, you're going to get all the revenue from your NCAA tournament appearances, which is different than, you know, what you typically experience in most leagues. So there's a big selling point for this potentially being able to, you know, rise all tides here. I get it. They're a small school. They've got a 3,500 person arena. So from an investment standpoint, you would need to see them step it up pretty significantly. I think you'd have to get that to at least 5,000 for them to be a realistic Pac-12 target. But that's not like a crazy project. That's not something that should be a deal breaker for them. The games have been fun against them when CSU has played St. Mary's. 7 meetings. Most of them came in the Medved era. The Rams are 4-3 in those games. Medved went 2-2. The last 2 matchups were 1-score games, so really fun matchup. CSU won 62-60 in Moraga back in 2022. The Gales won 64-61 in FOCO in 2023 when the Rams were having some struggles before kind of turning it on later. They've made 4 straight NCAA tournaments. So like I said, 11 in the 21st century. They've won less than 25 games just once in the last 11 years. So, I mean, they have been the definition of consistency. Clinched at least a share of 4 straight WCC regular season championships. Usually them and Gonzaga split. So that's kind of how that goes. But they fit geographically. They clearly can compete. I think if you're asking in principle, does this make the Pac-12 more fun? Yes. Does this make the Pac-12 more relevant in basketball? Yes. They're not a major brand. They're not somebody who's going to move the needle the same way that Gonzaga does, but there is value in those Gonzaga St. Mary's games, along with St. Mary's San Diego State. St. Mary's, you know, I'd love to see them go to Logan, Utah. I'd love to see them back in Moby. Those are really competitive, intriguing games. The big question is, do they make sense from a business perspective? And that's where it's kind of complicated, because I would say if you're talking about, is St. Mary's going to increase your bottom line right now? Probably not a whole lot. It's a small school. It's not like they command a crazy audience, but it's more of a big picture sell to me of, we are going to lean into, much like the Big East, the idea of our basketball brand really being valuable. And we're willing to kind of invest in St. Mary's because in the big picture, they're going to be better for our basketball conference. And I think they're going to be better for the members of the Pac-12. Again, it's not easy to fill that many non-conference games. And now you get to add 2 quality guaranteed games to the schedule every year that are going to be good for your metrics. It's not going to cost you a ton of money financially to go out there. Like, there's a lot of selling points for a program like St. Mary's making sense, on top of just the simple idea of, you might want to consider adding them because they're probably not going to stick around the WCC forever without Gonzaga, and you don't want to get beat to the punch. You don't want to see them end up in the Mountain West, or if somebody else was willing to get bold and go out to the West Coast, you know, the American or something like that, that would be a bummer. I do think that there are some financial realities that you have to kind of work around, and that being, can you sell them on the idea of a reduced share being worth it for them in the long run? I also wonder how much of this factors down to they might be on the Pac-12's radar, but they can't really make any moves right now until there's resolution with the lawsuits and the poaching penalties and everything that's going on between the Mountain West and the Pac-12. Giving you guys a little bit of inside perspective on kind of what I've heard with the plan with some of that. It's that the Pac-12 realizes they have more resources than the Mountain West. They also realize that the Mountain West has a bunch of money that they have to pay out to schools like UNLV and Air Force based on the promises they made them to keep them around. I think in large part that's why they finally pulled the trigger on North Dakota State, is the amount of cash that NDSU is going to bring to the table allows them to deliver some of that money that was promised. But if you're the Pac-12, you've got better lawyers, you've got more time, and you know that so long as you just keep dragging this out, eventually you're going to get a settlement out of the Mountain West, because the Mountain West can't afford 2 more years in court. They just can't, period. The Pac-12, although I don't think it would be the most optimal scenario, you do have some money, from those Pac-12 reserves that you can kind of finance some of this. And based on what I've heard about the caliber of lawyers that are involved in this, I imagine that's the case, because I don't know if schools like CSU would be able to afford that. I do think that's a factor in all of this, is you probably need to get that sorted out so you know exactly how much money you're going to have to work with, and then you can really kind of refine what this conference looks like moving forward. My guess is you don't see any more moves made between now and the first season of this Pac-12 2.0, but who knows? The Gonzaga move kind of came out of nowhere. So I think it's something to keep an eye on moving forward. And I'm not sure, like, if you could pick between Memphis and St. Mary's from a business standpoint, on top of them just having football, I think Memphis was the top target that you had hoped to bring. You don't seem to be in line on the vision. So I think you have and it opens up the possibility of increasing your TV revenue from getting into the Eastern time zone. And I think that just makes a whole lot more sense than you see people floating out UTSA and Rice and other Sunbelt schools and stuff like that. And that just doesn't do anything for me. If you're going to do that, you might as well have done a reverse merger in the first place. And maybe there's an argument they should have. I'm not going to go in circles on all of that again. It's one of those where you could argue it, and I think there's validity to that case. I think you can also understand why Oregon State and Washington State, from a perception perspective, didn't want to be associated with San Jose State and Nevada, Reno, and some of these schools, especially now that they've expanded and added Northern Illinois and some of those other programs. I think that takes the possibility of a reverse merger ever happening down the line off the table. I will say, I am going to be bummed, though, to not have guaranteed games against teams like New Mexico, and not going to miss everyone, not going to miss that Air Force football matchup. But I will miss elements of this current Mountain West, and watching, San Diego State play New Mexico on Saturday, watching late night Gonzaga St. Mary's. It was one of those situations where I think, especially just as a college basketball fan, and the fan perspective and a media perspective are two different things. Like, the media perspective, I try and be more fair to what is this process realistically going to look like? What are, what are the elements that make them a viable option? What are the elements that make them an unrealistic option? I try and bring all that. But just from the standpoint of what would be fun as a college basketball fan, St. Mary's in the Pac-12 would absolutely be a blast. I mean, it'd be more high-value games, allows you to keep one of the great rivalries in college basketball alive. And it allows you to further pull away and establish yourself as the best league, above the American, above the Mountain West. I still think it is. And when you look at a lot of the metrics on both of the football and the basketball side of things, it's clear which side you would rather be on. I'm not going to go through all that. I'm just to a point where it's like, I'm not trying to be dismissive or put down any of these other Mountain West brands because I've had a lot of fun memories associated with them. I just think that it's important that we look at all the context when diving into all this so we have an understanding of why things played out the way that they did. And the reality is, Oregon State and Washington State were never going to let a reverse merger happen. And frankly, I think there was a desire from schools like San Diego State, like CSU, who invest far more in athletics than some of those schools at the bottom. I feel like they were tired of those schools not stepping up to the plate, right, and not investing in the same way that they have. I mean, you look at the on-campus stadium additions for CSU and San Diego State. You're not going to see that in Reno. You're not going to see that at San Jose. It does seem like New Mexico is finally maybe investing a little bit more in football, which would be cool to see. They should capitalize on this small window of success that you've been able to have. And if they do that, who knows? Maybe they come to the Pac-12 down the line. But there are real realities where you can look at with teams like New Mexico, like Wyoming, where despite them being fun and having a lot of history with schools like CSU, why they really weren't viable options in this whole process. Because frankly, they don't move the needle enough. They don't command enough of a TV audience. And frankly, I think you could say the same thing about St. Mary's, but it's a little bit more unique with them, given your investment on the hoop side of things and adding a team like Gonzaga and showing a willingness to really kind of bank on that Pac-12 basketball being something that's a valuable component, for the Pac-12 with their media package. So I wanted to ramble about it a little bit. I know opinions will be very split on a school like St. Mary's, just given their size. But I think if you're looking at this through the lens of, would this be fun? Objectively, without a doubt, it would be fun. We are going to break down that win over San Jose State for CSU men's basketball. Perfect 7-0 in February. Let me shout out a couple of partners real quick, and then we will keep this party rolling. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails, whether you are hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser. They have 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. Toyota also offers more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. You love that, especially, gas prices might be rising here. The hybrid option is very clutch. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trails, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. If you want to hit the ski slopes, if you want to be able to cruise around town, if you basically just want to take advantage of everything that Colorado living has to offer, Toyota is the perfect vehicle for you. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics. They are the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. I also want to talk about Raising Cane's. If you need a Cane's fix, and I could use a Cane's fix right about now, it's about lunchtime. Order at raisingcanes.com or on the Cane's mobile app, where every chicken finger is hand battered and cooked to order just for you. Every crinkle cut fry comes from grade A premium potatoes. Each thick sliced Texas toast is lightly brushed with Cane's garlic butter blend and grilled on the griddle to golden brown perfection. Most importantly, where's that secret recipe Cane's sauce? I need it right about now. It's made in-house every single day. Fix those hunger cravings on the go now on the Cane's mobile ordering platform. Raising Cane's chicken fingers, one love. All right. Here, CSU Ram T in the Toyota chat says, St. Mary's helps the Pac-12 national profile, and that's very important right now. That's a great point. I mean, I think they genuinely left money on the table by not going with one of the streamers, but they want exposure, right? They want to be easily accessible on cable. And if you have matchups between St. Mary's and Gonzaga, St. Mary's and San Diego State, St. Mary's and Utah State, St. Mary's and CSU even, you're going to have more games on TV, which is huge. Mark says Pac-12 can play hardball with the Mountain West and offer a reasonable settlement. I have a feeling the cash flow situation will be really tight in the Mountain West. if they miss payments to UNLV or Air Force, what does that mean? That basically means they're free to walk, based on my interpretation of the agreement that those schools signed. And those payments have to be delivered on time too. So it's interesting. We don't know the full details of this Mountain West media rights, but essentially they promise that it won't be a dip for the legacy or the remaining Mountain West members, regardless of whether they get those numbers from the TV networks or not. So, dipping into those reserves, that long term just seems very unrealistic, especially the way you've lost some of your biggest brands. I just don't see the viability of that, over a 10-year stretch. And that's why I still keep coming back to, I bet you 3 years from now, UNLV's in the Pac-12. I just think it makes too much sense. And I think at some point, UNLV will look at the writing on the wall and say, we have gotten everything that we can get out of this. And kudos to them for leveraging their way into a bunch of cash up front. It probably does make sense for them to stay put at the moment, take all that money that you were guaranteed. But what about 2-3 years from now? That's kind of what I keep coming back to when you're making $3 million a year in media revenue, which was, what you were making 15 years before, but feels like a loss compared to, when you factor in inflation and the fact that every other league, got a giant bump in their media rights. So if you're still making the same money you were making 15 years ago, and in some ways that's a loss. I mean, I think it makes too much sense, especially given how limited the options are for the Pac-12. And maybe they should have been more aggressive with UNLV from the get-go, and we would have this all resolved. But hey, it is what it is. Now we're in the position we're in. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. I do want to get into the CSU San Jose State game and then kind of set the scene for this week. I can ramble about hypotheticals with realignment until my face turns blue. I know we've talked about it a ton of late. It's been good for metrics, though. The audience seems to be into it. So if you guys ever have a realignment topic you would care for me to broach, I am always down to listen to you guys. I will say, too, I'm going to try and do the mailbag again on Friday. I waited too long into the show to do it last week, so I didn't really get to do it as I envisioned. So I would like for you guys to participate in that again. I think it's a fun way to engage with the audience. So I'll put a tweet out asking for responses to that. Maybe I'll make like an email for it that people can write into as well. Brainstorming live on air. Always great. All right, let's get into those takeaways against San Jose State. They won 85-73, as I said. 6th straight win over San Jose State for CSU. Got swept in that weird year where Isaiah missed significant time. But the Rams now 29-2 all times against the Spartans, 23-2 in conference matchups since they joined the Mountain West. Depending on what happens in Vegas, there's a very strong possibility that this is the last game between these two programs for the foreseeable future. For one thing, there's not really great incentive to play them because they don't help you metrics wise. On top of, they're always friskier than they seem on the surface, just because Tim Miles is a good coach, and every year it feels like they have the one baller on their team that's capable of going off for 30 against you. This year, it's Colby Garland, who I've talked about a lot, one of the leading scorers in the Mountain West. He had a great game against CSU, unsurprisingly. You could say the same thing about the kid from Fresno and Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn at UNLV, all great players. All had nice outings against CSU. It does kind of feel like the Rams have subscribed to the mindset of that guy might get his, but if we shut down everybody else, unless he goes for 50, probably going to be able to outlast you. Do feel like depth has been the story for CSU in this win streak, especially, but particularly of late, where you've had some big individual showings. Jace Butler's been great. Rechsteiner shooting the hell out of the ball. We'll talk about him. But it's your second straight game where you have five guys, with double-digit scoring figures. No, you don't have somebody going off for 28 like Garland, but 15 out of Booth. And he was huge in the second half. You get 20 out of Rechsteiner. Butler, 10 points, 5 rebounds, a couple of assists, and 30 minutes of turnover-free basketball. Jevin Mooney's had 12 and 10 assists, so a double-double from him. Bemba gave you 15 off the bench. It's just one of those scenarios where you can't key in on one guy, and if he's off, you're good. Like the most overwhelming element to CSU right now is the fact that they've got so many different guys stepping up across the board, and the consistency has been huge, right? You couldn't necessarily depend on everyone in the rotation night to night 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. Part of that probably due to the shuffling of the lineup due to unexpected injuries to Jorgensen. Now Pasquarelli's missed a couple of weeks. Bemba, has missed time. You've had multiple guys who are key members of that 7-man rotation now miss multiple weeks of basketball. You're going to feel the impact of that. On top of a lot of these guys, when they came to CSU, although the ceiling was theoretically high, there were a lot of tools that you were excited about. It was a lot of instances of players needing to refine things, needing to develop and grow. And while you knew that it could be something, there was going to be kind of a learn and learn on the fly type experience, right? Which means you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. But now, as we get down the stretch here of the season, you're kind of benefiting from being patient with some of those players who had real lows, who had real struggles, especially early in the league slate, where the Rams had to play a top heavy schedule. And there's no secrets, schematically. It always gets tougher in league play. But when you have as many key guys from last year's team no longer in the picture for the Rams, it's not shocking to me that it took CSU a while to find their footing in the league slate. I didn't think they would start 3-8, to be fair. It's like 5-6 even would have been probably a little bit more realistic. And had that been the case, who knows what the conversation would be right now in terms of at-large candidacy. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. You look back on that Utah State game, Fresno, DU, the same stuff we've talked about a million times. If you're sitting here, already north of 20 wins, you might have a realistic case for an at-large bid. Unfortunately, started slow, but it's been impressive to see the way things have turned around here. And I think the fact that Jace Butler, night to night, Brandon Rechsteiner, what you're getting out of him, the fact that you were able to hit on those guys, the fact that Kerry Booth is starting to turn into the player that was envisioned when, he was a 4-star guy and when he signed with Notre Dame before he went to Illinois. The fact that you were able to hit on those guys is so encouraging in the big picture because, one, I think that's a testament to the roster building and recruitment abilities of Ali Farokhmanesh. It's not easy to replace Neat Clifford and Jalen Lake, and then you lose Kyan Evans and Croc to the portal to Minnesota and North Carolina. Like you're really in a tough spot if you're Ali, kind of getting thrown into the fire right out of the gate there. And for him to hit on as many of the transfers as he did, even as inconsistent and maybe as ineffective as he's been in the league slate compared to non-con, Augie has his moments with CSU too. Like, you really didn't miss on anyone. I don't think Augie has been quite as impactful as they would have anticipated. We'll see what happens with him moving forward. But, hitting on Jace Butler, hitting on Kerry Booth, hitting on all these different guys, like that shows the vision and even Pasquarelli, like it being able to translate from Marist to CSU. That gives me a lot of confidence moving forward. I also feel like, and this is just kind of my gut, having talked to, coaches and also some families and stuff like that, I don't really get the impression that a mass exodus is imminent for CSU. We'll see. Inevitably, you're going to lose a couple of guys. That's just what college basketball is. There are guys who are not playing right now. Most of them are probably going to dip. There are always a surprise or two. One of these guys out of the 7 in the rotation, 6 have eligibility for next year. So, maybe 1 to 2 end up leaving out of those 6. Ideally, they all stick around. We'll see what happens. I mean, if they can, and you go out and you add a veteran point guard in the portal, look out, because the foundation is great. But I just think in the big picture sense, the fact that Ali was able to have the vision with these guys, was then able to bring them to campus and develop them. Like, not only was the vision there, but the execution was there. And unsurprisingly, as he did with Isaiah Stevens and Neat Clifford and David Roddy and all these players over the years, you knew he was going to work with them one-on-one. The development side has always been a a big thing for CSU in the Medved Farokhmanesh era. But the fact that they were able to have the vision, execute it, and also keep the locker room intact and have genuine buy-in with this many new pieces, even in spite of some of the struggles that you had in the league slate, that's a testament to coaching. That's a testament to the relationships established. And you've got to credit the guys too for having the buy-in, for staying true and not punting on the season, because this really easily could have gone a different direction, especially after you lose that Utah State game, especially where you shoot lights out, but you just have so many stupid turnovers. Then you've got to go on the road, and you're playing San Diego State and Wyoming. Like, that was such a brutal stretch of the schedule, and you lost a couple of games that were kind of 50-50. A mentally weaker team, I think that probably kills their season. And instead, a lot like what we saw last year, we have just seen the Rams do a 180, and the team that we are watching right now on March 2nd is not the CSU team we saw in mid-January. And retention will certainly be a big factor in all of this. Again, I don't expect a mass exodus, but you never know. I got to imagine with how, Rechsteiner shooting the ball, with how some of these guys have performed during stretches this year, there's probably already high major coaches and their DMs that are lurking, that are trying to poach. We all know what this is today. But I think that's the benefit of the profile of some of the guys you went out and got, right? You had to suffer some lumps. You had to be a little bit patient with Jace Butler. You had to be a little bit patient with Kerry Booth. But you knew that if you were, what it could be is really, really intriguing. And for those guys to evolve the way that they have, it's really exciting. And it's a big reason why CSU is competitive right now. But it's certainly a big reason why I think the outlook for the program is very encouraging moving forward. And I wrote about this on the site, wrote a column after the San Jose State win. I encourage you to go check that out. Also, takeaways. I think we had like 15 pieces on hoops in February. Again, take advantage of that Die Hard promo if you have not already. Get yourself a free shirt. It's time to gear up before the Mountain West tournament here. But I'm glad that the Rams were able to make this season interesting, because I love college basketball so much. I know it doesn't move the needle like football does. You look at the numbers when I do all hoops compared to, throwing a couple of football topics in there. It's never going to get the same type of traction, but it's such a fun sport. I know that the CSU community cares about hoops, I would say, more so than some of the other colleges, in state. I think, you look at Air Force, like, you really only care about football. I guess their baseball program's decent as well. CU fans, there's a few hoops fans out there, but basically exclusively football. We care about hoops in Fort Collins, and it's been so fun over the last decade that, like, it would have been a major bummer if the mid-January Rams had proved to be just what this team was, and they ended up going 500 or something like that. Now it's in a position where you're kind of playing with nothing to lose. Like, you don't have a super realistic at-large case outside of winning both games this week and then winning at least the first three. And probably if you lost a championship game, it'd have to be super tight. Like, maybe at that point you would have a case in what seems to be a weak bubble. But now you kind of just get to go in and play free, and whatever happens, happens. Nobody's going to expect you to win 4 in 4 days, but it's on the table, especially with how the Rams are playing right now, and especially with what the league looks like right now. There's not anybody that feels unbeatable. I mean, Utah State's had some slip-ups. New Mexico, they've also had some slip-ups. San Diego State's super inconsistent this year. Honestly, New Mexico and Utah State scare me more than San Diego State does, and that's crazy because they've owned Vegas historically over the last decade. Even when they come in as like the 4th or the 5th seed, it seems like you look up come Saturday and there they are in the championship game with about 6,000 San Diego State fans who make the drive over on Friday night. The Rams have given themselves an opportunity, and I think one of the things that is going to at least give them a chance and has factored into the sustainability of this, despite it hasn't been the craziest run of wins. You look at that win streak last year for CSU between the end of the regular season and the Mountain West tournament. You had to beat Utah State twice. You had to beat Boise twice, including a true road win over the Broncos. I don't know if it's that, but beating UNLV on the road was nice. You had to win that game against San Diego State at home and Wyoming at home. And now if you can pull the upset in the pit, which is a big if, you've got an opportunity to really make some noise here down the stretch. And I think that's exciting. And you're finding ways to grind out wins. Yes, San Jose State was able to hang around. I think that first half probably made Ram fans sweat a little bit more than they would have hoped to. But it was a fun game. It was back and forth. Both teams are hitting a lot of threes. That was kind of the difference, is those threes stopped falling for San Jose State in the second half that they hit early on and allowed them to hang around. They also benefited from points off of turnovers, second chance points. Those two areas are really what allowed San Jose State to hang around in this game. And if you're looking for things that need to be cleaned up, that's it. Like 11 turnovers, that's not horrible from CSU, but it resulted in 16 points the other way. So they end up being catastrophic, even if it's not a crazy total. It's those pick six turnovers we talk about, right? Not all turnovers are graded equally. And then the second chance points, you're -7 there and you're -10 in points off turnovers, -17 combined between those two. You tidy that up a little bit. This is a 20-point win. So I think there are little things here and there that this team still needs to improve. The turnovers frustrate me, but when you look at the way this group is sharing the basketball, the efficiency with which they're scoring, especially on the road. I mean, you put up 1.4 points per possession on the road. I know it's San Jose State. It's not a hostile atmosphere, and really neither is UNLV if we're being real. But to execute like that on the road and to be that efficient is huge. And I think it's a product of, again, not being so sole dependent on one individual. You're going to get key stretches where Rechsteiner heats up from deep, and he certainly had that in this game. 5 made threes in the first half, 6 in total to finish with a team high 20 points. Over the last 7 games, Rechsteiner is shooting like north of 40% from three-point. I think it's 43% from three-point. He's averaging about 15 points a game, back-to-back, 3 straight, I think now of 18 plus. Like, he is really shooting the ball well. Feels like they've been able to optimize him a little bit since they've gotten him off ball a little bit more. And that's been huge. The fact that guys like Jace Butler and Jevin Mooney, Jevin especially in this game, 12 points, 10 assists, have been able to handle some of those point guard obligations for CSU. Maybe none of them are really true point guards per se. I feel like Jev's the best at driving and kicking. Jace is a little bit better at getting to the hoop and drawing contact. But both of those guys going downhill, it's opened things up along the perimeter for guys like Rechsteiner. Even some of your bigs like Jorgensen and Bemba, it just creates more space for them to work with. And it's been really encouraging to see the Rams kind of lean into that identity. Obviously, if you shoot 62% from the field, you're going to be in good shape most nights, especially when you also go 53% from three-point, 83% at the line, 20 of 24 at the free throw line, 9 of 17. And I love that output. If you went 9 of 17 from three-point every game, that'd be about the perfect recipe in my estimation, especially when you're also getting 38 points in the paint. That willingness to work the post and not shy away from the physicality of conference games has been so key for this team being able to flip things. And I felt like we saw that in stretches with Bemba, and he had a couple of rough fouls in this game, but I mean, 7 points in the second half, 8 in the first, and then you get 15 out of Kerry Booth, who just all of a sudden realized these guys can't guard me. I'm a way better athlete. I'm way bigger than all of them. Why don't I just go straight at him? Did a great job of asserting his will, getting to the free throw line. And to his credit, he knocked down those free throws. I've been so impressed with his free throw and three-point shooting this season. He is so much more efficient than I would have anticipated coming in. And now that we're seeing him grow as somebody who can kind of play with his back to the basket, and he's got a lot of room to grow there. Of the bigs, he's probably the least developed from a footwork perspective, but he is really athletic, obviously. And in a matchup like this, where you're just bigger, stronger, more explosive than everybody, force the issue. Forced to prove they can guard you without fouling, and clearly they couldn't. And I just think that it's so exciting that now when it feels like Kerry needs to take over, you feel pretty confident that he can do that for a couple of minutes. You feel confident that Rechsteiner is going to rain those open threes. In January, a little bit streakier, but his shot selection has improved. I do think it helps that they've got him off ball. He's such a dangerous guy on catch and shoot opportunities. That's been big. The evolution of Jace Butler and Jev has been big. Getting Bemba back in the lineup has been big. But I think just the consistency with these guys night to night is what is most impressive and is what gives me the most reason to believe that maybe the Rams could go on a run in Vegas. I recognize that winning 4-4 is really tough. CSU had to do that last year. Maybe they aren't able to replicate the same type of magic, although with how hot the Rams were playing down the stretch last year, shit, I'd have taken them to win 6-6. Like, you weren't beating that team. Still kills me that it ends on a missed call. I know they never call the travel in that situation, but he walked. We all saw it. Should have gone to the Sweet 16. It's one that's going to eat at me for the rest of my life. But that team was so much fun, and it was the consistency night to night that allowed them to do it. And while the Rams maybe don't have the same star power, they don't have a Neat Clifford, they do have great depth, and they have great consistency across the board from really 7 different guys. And I'm kind of writing Pasquarelli into that. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt despite having missed the last 2 weeks. But he's a guy who's grown a lot as a defender. He can stretch the floor for you. So having another a 3-point shooter out there, that's only going to help you come Vegas, and just having another body that you can depend on to throw out there. But I loved what CSU was able to do in this game. Yes, you'd like to execute a little bit cleaner in terms of the turnovers and that type of stuff. But the Rams are grinding out games, man. And the growth we've seen with them when it comes to closing has just been night and day. They find ways to get it done. And maybe they aren't a dominant defensive team, but I do think they're able to get stops in key stretches of wins. And I think we saw that especially against San Diego State, Fresno, and Saturday against San Jose State. I will say UNLV made things a little bit interesting, but they do that to everyone, man. Did you see what Gibbs Longhorn did this past weekend in their win over Nevada? The guy is insane. He might legit get $5 million in the portal. Like, there's no way he's going to be back at UNLV. I hate having that type of commentary, but what he is doing is just stupid right now. Another guy I'm looking forward to watching in person at the conference tournament. But I like the mentality right now. They're playing inside out. They're sharing the ball. They're knocking down shots, but they're not getting too passive and settling for outside jumpers all day like they maybe did too frequently early on in the season. And in league play, I mean, you look at the numbers right now, CSU's got the second best effective field goal percentage in league games, second best 2-point percentage, second best free throw rate, plus they're top 5 in overall efficiency. Now, they still turn the ball over too much. They turn the ball over more than anyone. But when you're able to limit those turnovers, when you're able to shoot the ball the way that they did, when you're able to own the paint, when you're +8 on the glass, +10 in the paint, and you're putting up 1.4 points per possession, you're going to win a lot of games. As far as this week goes, again, much different matchup than the first 2 times these teams played. Winning in the pit, a tall task. You're 14-53. They're all time. UNM's won 5 straight against you, so it's not a matchup that's been super favorable for you over the last 2.5 years or so. Before that, though, the Rams had won 6 out of 7 against UNM, so it kind of flips back and forth. You've got a lot of different guys that can hurt you. They shoot the ball efficiently from the perimeter. They can kill you in transition. That's one thing I think whoever can dictate the tempo is going to be especially big in this game. And you would assume that you're going up against a hungry team. I mean, they're trying to keep their Mountain West title hopes alive, trying to keep their at-large case alive in case they don't win it all in Vegas. Really talented team, but that can kind of go 2 ways on you, right? Like, it can be something that fuels you and provides a spark. It can also cause you to press and to be tense, especially if you're missing shots early, especially if you don't execute out of the gate. Fans get quiet. All of a sudden, that home atmosphere, almost works against you because you're looking around seeing thousands of people, with a shocked look on their face standing there quietly. So I'm really interested to see how this one plays out. Does feel like can you hang around? If it's a game at halftime, I like CSU's chances of being able to make things interesting down the stretch. You're going to have to shoot the ball with the type of efficiency you did against San Jose State, not 63% from the field or whatever, but shot selection is going to be big. Hitting open threes is going to be big. And then you've got to prevent some of those pick 6 type turnovers that killed you in the loss against Utah State that could have killed you against San Jose State. You do that against the Lobos and their building, when they get out and running on you, you're going to be in trouble. So I feel like the Rams want to grind this game out. You want to make New Mexico play deep into the shot clock. You want to run clock yourself. CSU's not a team that plays with a ton of tempo traditionally anyways. They're comfortable in that half court setting. I will say, though, if you are sluggish in the half court, then New Mexico starts pressing. It'll be interesting to see how the Rams kind of counter with that. We are in overtime, so the conversation continues at the I don't want to go too long here, but just to give you guys an outlook of what's possible for CSU. Currently tied for 6th in the conference standings with Boise State and UNLV. If the season were to end, that's how it would be. You're tied for 6th. The seeding in the Mountain West tournament is not where you finish in league standings. All 3 of those teams would be tied, despite the fact that the Rams swept UNLV. As of now, though, because they do have that tiebreaker against UNLV, Boise would be 6, CSU would be 7, UNLV would be 8. All 3 of those still on the possibility for all 3 of those teams. Technically could still finish as high as 4th, but it's really improbable. That would take CSU winning out. You would need GCU to drop at least 1 game, and you would need Nevada to drop both because you only played both of those teams once. You do have the tiebreaker against GCU. You don't against Nevada. Not super likely when you look at the schedule. Nevada has to go to Laramie, which is tough. Then they got Air Force at home. GCU also plays a game against Air Force and Fresno, I think. So a pretty favorable schedule for both of those teams. My gut is the Rams end up in the 6th spot, which I think is still deceptively big. We've talked a lot about wanting to avoid that 8-9. Depending on what happens with Wyoming, they could fall to 10. And so you could get them in that 7-10 game. And I just don't want to have to deal with them. I don't think you're scared of the Pokes. You're the better team, but they're just going to be so much more charged up to play you than a San Jose State or an Air Force, given that you would have to win 4 in 4 days. As little tread as you can put on the tire in those first 2 games, I think is going to be paramount for the Rams, and avoiding a rival for having to play them a 3rd time in a year is just the most ideal route. Period. I'd rather play Fresno again, as wonky as that matchup has been. And honestly, that'd be a scary one because you've seen how CSU struggled with them at times. But if you're going to make a run, you can't be scared of teams like San Jose State, like Fresno, like Wyoming, whoever you go up against. You should beat them. You are the superior team. Really looking forward to that game against New Mexico late night. If you're a hockey fan, got a ton of abs coverage coming up as well. Shout out to all of you for tuning in. Much love for everybody supporting the program. Combine was this past weekend. I'm not going to talk about it, but the portal is killing the Mountain West. They only had 3 representatives, so I'm not going to go through it, but how many of those guys at the Combine started at a Mountain West school and now are, at a P4 school? I think that's an interesting conversation. They had 13 2 years ago, down to 3 this year. Something to keep an eye on. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.